Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Before we get into Julep, I think to kind of set the stage, it would be wonderful to hear a little bit about the journey and what's made you the leader and the CEO that you are today. And so maybe the best place to start is the very beginning, where you grew up, what your family was like, what being a kid was like for James Carroll.
Well, actually I was born in Korea, and I kind of often tell the story. Actually, my parents had a more interesting story than mine, but I think as an entrepreneur you go through a lot of crazy things, and it's... Can you hear? Yeah. Okay, great. But there's nothing as hard as sort of moving to an all-new country. Like, we immigrated when I was 4, and not speaking the language and having to support your family. So I know that there's nothing that I will do that will ever be as hard as what my parents did. There's no amount of work that no number of hours I will work that will rival what they had to do. So I think that sort of seeing that was incredibly inspiring from a young age. My dad actually lost his family when he was 10. The border between North and South Korea sort of went up one day. And I don't really appreciate this, but it was a permeable border, and then one day they made it permanent. So there was always sort of guards, and you always had to go through, but people traveled through the border regularly, and then one day he's coming home and it closes, and so he's 10, and he lives in a mud hut. He builds this mud hut with his cousins, and he digs sweet potatoes and eats them all winter long. And I brought my kids actually to Korea a couple years ago. It's an interesting thing about work-life balance, because it was a tough time at Julep, and we were kind of, I was juggling a lot of things and doing fundraising, and the board was like, oh my gosh, you have to be meeting investors. And I had committed to my dad that I would take him on his 70th birthday back to Korea, and we were going to have a party, and I was going to bring my kids for the first time when they were 10 and 7. And I thought, like I did, the idea crossed my mind. Oh, and then I got invited to Jada Pinkett Smith's house to meet Michelle Obama. Right? And so I was like, oh crap, of all the times. And I thought, could I send my kids to Korea and then meet them there? Anyway, there's lots about life where you have to figure out what your priorities are. And I do think when you make the right call, like at that moment, I sort of knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. At 70, it's not like the physical health and ability to travel might be there a decade or from then. And so it was an important moment, and I decided that I was going to prioritize that, so we went. And it was amazing. I mean, we didn't expect to see these things. I got to show my son the house. We actually went and we couldn't believe it. We found the hut was still there that my dad had built. And this old guy comes over and he's like, I have this all on my flip video camera, and now I don't know what to do with it, because who uses flip anymore? I do have it. It has a USB port, so I'm sure I can get it down somehow. This guy comes over and he says, when a million years ago, there was this little boy who lived here, and it was amazing that he took care of himself, and he went to school on his own, and he just, would be so smart, because all the other kids would go asking for food when they were hungry, which was at dinner time. So another lesson about entrepreneurship is timing is everything. The guy said this boy was so smart that he would wait until dinner was over. And then if a young kid comes to her house and asks for food, even if you guys are, if you are struggling, if there are any scraps, you're willing to give it to the kid, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was like, this was the most well-fed orphan ever. He would be sharing his food with the other orphans. And then my dad was like, oh my gosh, I was that boy, I am that boy. And so they both started crying, and I'm crying, and my kids were like, what's going on? We don't understand Korean. Why is everybody crying? And so, look at sort of, hey, like that's truly scrappy, right? Being scrappy is one of our core values at Julep. You know, sort of finding a way to live and to find joy still in living, right? We laughed so much when we were growing up, and my parents had this convenience store. They were up early in the morning, you know, I didn't realize like 7-Eleven meant 7 days a week, 11 hours a day until later on in life. I was like, oh, that's what that means. Do you guys know what that means? Like, that's what 7-Eleven means. And so when you own a 7-Eleven, that's what you're working. 7 hours a day, like 7 days a week, 11 hours a day, and probably 12 to 13 because you have to like, you know, pick up the goods, stock your shelves, and close it down. And it's usually only 2 people who are doing all of that. I think that the inspiration that I get around sort of knowing also that a family can work if there's love. You know, I grew up sort of in this environment where we didn't have many things. I think I had like 1 toy at Christmas time when I was 7, and I don't remember that as being sad. I think it was like fun, and I knew my parents loved me, and I always say that to my husband. He's like, just because you had a crappy childhood doesn't mean that our kids have to. It's sort of freeing. I know a lot of women struggle with like work-life balance and am I doing the right things, and I think my mom was an awesome mom. And she worked a lot because she had to. And so sometimes when you have the luxury of making choices, it feels more burdensome. And I think we're all lucky that we have a lot of choices. I think if you're in this room, you have a lot of choices that a lot of people in the world don't have. And so keeping those things in your mind. I mean, sometimes, you know, when I think about how much the world has invested in Julep, right? I mean, I think like how many lives could have been saved with the money that, you know, that has been invested in us, and how precious those resources are, and how much of a responsibility there is to make something really fantastic and enduring and amazing out of the trust that we've been given by so many.
Growing up, you alluded a little bit to the family dynamics. Did you have siblings?
I have 2 younger sisters, and they were born in Canada, so they're actually 8 and 10 years younger. And so I bossed them around a lot. I'm my older sister. And, you know, I think when one of my sisters graduated from college, she said, you know, I've graduated from college now. Like, when are you going to stop bossing me around? And just that week, there was an article in the New York Times where there was a 100-year-old woman, and her sister was like 102. And so her birthday was like, it's my 100th birthday. And she was like, and my sister's still bossing me around because she's 102. And so I cut out that article and I mailed it to my sister. And I was like, if I live to 102, then it'll be at least until you're, you know, 92.
Those dynamics last. So bridging childhood to leaving Toronto, you went to Princeton for undergrad, I believe. What was that like leaving home and going to school? And
you know, it's funny because I didn't realize. So my parents said you are going to University of Toronto because I grew up in Toronto and you're living at home. Unless you get into you know, some like an Ivy League school. And I didn't know what that was, like what even was, because we were in Toronto. And I had a cousin who lived outside Princeton, New Jersey. And so she sent me an application and I applied for everything at the last minute. I remember to this day that the application was beige. And I had to go buy beige liquid paper because I made a mess of it. And they would give you a spot that says like you have an extenuating circumstances, and I think they mean like did you have a death in the family or something. And I wrote like, I'm really sorry, this application is so messy. I have one copy. And, I know it's full of beige liquid paper, but please like disregard that and really read what I'm saying. And then I went to take the SATs, and I didn't know that you had to pay, because in Canada you don't have to pay for those kinds of things. And so I show up on my own because my parents are working, and you know, I almost could have taken it. And the guy behind me was like, hey, are you really here to take the SATs and you don't have a parent and you didn't bring money? And I was like, yep. And he said, well, I'll pay for that. And if here's my address, and you know, you can pay me me back, just promised to mail a check, and we did do that. I went home and told my parents the story. If it weren't for that guy, like the kindness of strangers, the rest of this would never have unfolded. Like, I really wish, I've thought about trying to figure out if I could go back and trace that somehow. Like my whole life would be different if it weren't for the fact that he was willing to do that, because it was January, it was the very last SATs you could take to get into college. And so that's how I ended up in Princeton, New Jersey.
The kindness of strangers. And when you were in college, what did you study?
I studied public policy and international affairs, which was really the major for people who couldn't pick a major. So I got to do a little bit of everything. I actually took quite a bit of pottery classes. You come to my house, I have lots of asymmetrical plates.
Wait, you still do pottery?
No, I don't. I did in law school though, and I found this local potter in New Haven. I was at Yale, and I took classes with her, and I said, in college I got a key to the studio so I could go do pottery in the middle of the night whenever I wanted to. And she said, you know what, if you pay me $30,000 a year, I too will give you a key to my studio.
You mentioned law school. Now, it's funny, you talk to a lot of undergraduates today. I'll say, well, law school is very practical, graduate school to apply for. A lot of people go to law school who aren't really sure if they want to become lawyers, but a lot of people say, oh, I'm really glad I went. And there's another camp that say, I don't know if it was that relevant to my career. Which camp are you in? Are you glad you went to law school, given what you're doing now?
Not from a work perspective, definitely. I met my husband there, and I proposed to him in our third year. So I'm happily married and have 2 kids. So I'm super happy from that perspective, which is one of life's most important things, to find your partner. But I wouldn't advise going to law school to find your partner. That's not a great way to do it necessarily. I came home from work one day when I was a lawyer, and I said to my then fiance, I would rather cut off my toe than go to work tomorrow. And he was like, A, ew. Like, nobody wants your toe. Why would you even think that? And B, you have 2 Ivy League degrees. Like, surely you can find something else to do other than self-mutilation that doesn't lead to a job. And that was a rational point. So I actually, at that time, it was like, 97, I think the .com boom, and so a lot of the MBAs were going to startups in New York, and so the consulting firms were reaching deep and hiring PhDs and JDs, and so I was able to get a job at BCG because I was thinking about going to business school. I actually applied to all these jobs where I was like, surely, I'm smart, I'm super hardworking, I should be able to do all these jobs, right? Random, I don't even know what, I can't remember, but all over the place I applied to jobs and I got 0 interviews, and so, or even notes back at that time. And so I was like, okay, I've got to maybe get a business degree, and I think my husband and I graduated from law school with $300,000 in debt together, so we paid off a mortgage before we ever bought a house. He was like, how about we pay off the debt that we have before we get new debt? Is that a good idea? And so so I didn't go to business school, but I was able to work at BCG, which was an amazing experience.
Where were you?
I was in the DC office, in name, but sort of a lot of flights into a lot of different cities on the East Coast.
And was there an industry specialty for you? Or was it,
consumer retail. Yeah.
And then you ultimately decided to make the leap to Starbucks, which was that brought you to Seattle originally?
It is. I really wanted to work for a brand. So even at that point, I knew that it was really important that sort of speaking to consumers in a way that they were responding emotionally was really important to me. And so it was going to be Apple or Starbucks. In terms of sort of where to live, and at that point we had our son, and it felt like Seattle was a great city overall, and I'm glad that we picked Seattle. but that's sort of what helped lean the balance towards Starbucks.
And so let's see, where are we in time? How long have you been in Seattle now?
I do it by the age of my son, so those of you guys are parents know that, right? So he's 13, which means like I was total teenage mom. And so he was 18 months when we moved here. So it's been, like 12 years practically.
You're a full Seattleite. And so at Starbucks, you were there for a few years, right?
Right, I was there for about 3 or 4 years.
What were you doing for them?
I was in the new ventures group, so we were working on launching new products and sort of the line of consumer products that we had in the grocery stores, so whole bean coffee and frappuccino and other brand extensions, and then an amazing product called Starbucks Coffee Liqueur. Which is how I learned that women lie in focus groups. So we focus group this thing like all across the country. And actually that's, to this day, at Julep, when we're doing things, I really, I like to actually test things in a way that is as real as possible. So, when people say like, do you test things? We're like, by which, if you mean, do we like, actually build it and put it out to real people? Yes, we do. Across the country, all of these women were like, I will buy that stuff. I want a case of it.
It's like liqueur, coffee flavor.
Yeah, it was the only real coffee flavored liqueur, like only liqueur made with real coffee on the market. It's like a million times better than Kahlua. The product was phenomenal. We were like figuring out how you could ship, these like real Starbucks espresso to Jim Beam to include in this amazing, delicious, incredible product. And that everybody swore up and down that they would like buy cases and cases of. So then we get it out to the market and we're like, hey, y'all, where are you? So what happens actually is that, hey, if you have, how many of you guys do have Kahlua at home? Right, okay. Like, are you in the market to buy another coffee liqueur? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to us. Everybody has their one, and like, oh, when you finish it, like, when you're 95, when I'm 100 and I'm celebrating in the New York Times, then maybe I'm buying another one, but until then, you're not, right? And so an important thing to know about sort of when you're building a business for a customer is to think through all of those elements of that. Like if they're like, yeah, I would totally have it, but when are they next shopping for it, right? It's super important to know that cycle. If it's a product that they buy once every 10 years, once every 20 years, it's kind of hard to be top of mind and drive a lot of market share.
Well, so far, lawyer, BCG consultant, manager of a number of products at Starbucks, and then after all these years, you think, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. So talk about some of the psychology there as you were about to leave Starbucks and began to think about the early vision for Julep.
That's one of the questions that people most ask, like, how do you know? And I think there are 2 times people ask that, right? Like, how do you know you want to get married? And how do you know you want to start a company? That the internet is full of stories of both of those. I think for me, actually, they were remarkably similar in that there was just one, it was gradual. So the idea for Julep was a business plan that I wrote at night for almost a year, and I never planned to do that, right? It was just like, oh, I wonder about this, I'm gonna noodle on this, I'm gonna buy a book about how to start a company, I bought, Google Marketing for Dummies, like, it was a hobby at first, and every time I went to a city, I'd check out different products, every time there was an online experience, I'd kind of think about that and how it related to sort of how women shopped, and so it was sort of I didn't realize that it was becoming an obsession. I would have said like, oh, it's like I do lots of things, and this is something that, I work my day job, I rush home. I would actually at that time drink we were collaborated with Pepsi. So I think it was like a terrible toxic drink called Monster or something awful like that on the way home, right? Because I'm having coffee all day long, and like at some point that stops working. And so on the way home, does he want to come home? And it was important to me to be awake and alive and engaged when I walked in the door, not like, oh, like, you know, screaming kids, right? It was like, I want to walk in and start over again and have a new other day. And so I would drink this garbage and get home. And so then I'd be like wired, right? Like for hours to come. That must have been what it was. So I wrote the business plan after they went to bed. So like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and it's whatever, sometimes crappy TV on. And so I am sort of researching and thinking about it. And at one point, I talked to my mentor at BCG, who was Steve Gumby, the CEO for North America at the time. And I didn't realize I was calling him and trying to talk to him about this a bunch. And he said at one point, is this like NPR? If I invest, will you stop calling me? I was like, why, yes. And what's interesting is, for those of you guys who are thinking about starting a company, if that's sort of what this is about, you know, I didn't know the words to ask for a check. Like, if you have somebody, a mentor, your boss, like think about your boss now, and think about asking that person, or your boss's boss, right? And think about asking that person for money for your company. Like, what are you going to say? Do you want to invest? That sounds like kind of impersonal. Like, I don't know. I've never invested in anything before. I don't know what the words are. Like, do you want to write me a check? Give me money? Like, what are you going to say? And I landed on the phrase, do you want to participate? Because I thought it was a journey that I wanted the right people on the journey with me. And it's funny because I was saying this to a fellow entrepreneur at some Andreessen Horowitz thing recently, and I said, you know, how did you think about like how to ask for the check, you know, when you were first doing angels? And he said, oh, that's easy. I just ask people, do you want to be on the right side of history? So I had a slightly different approach, but you know, I think it was sort of. It was that, like, I didn't realize that I was talking about it so much, and then, like, the first person offered to write me a check, and he was super smart, and really analytic, and really, like, hard ass. Is this gonna go online? Steve Gumby won't ever watch this, but, when you have somebody like that who believes in you, it's really powerful. So I do think that, hey, it's something that I tell everybody. If you find people you believe in, tell them you believe in them, because it's really important. I couldn't believe that somebody as serious would work with so many CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, somebody who was so smart and thoughtful, could believe in me. And that was a huge boost of confidence. And, you know, I think I didn't even know how to ask for that, really. So it was a tremendous first step and gift. And then at that point, you know, then I called up my girlfriends and I was like, should I do this? One of my good friends is Julie Bornstein, who's now the CMO at Sephora. And she used to work here locally. She was my only friend in Seattle when I first moved here. And, you know, she was like, well, why wouldn't you? You know, like, why not? For those of you guys who've been to Italy, eventually been to Italy, I love Italy. You know, and at the end of dinner, like when they're overfeeding you a million things, and I just remember this one really sweet little restaurant where the guy came by and he was like, limoncello? And I was like, are you kidding? And he was like, why not? And so I always picture that guy when you're, you know, sometimes like experiences in life that are the most obvious to you is like a limoncello, why not moment.
Well, I'm gonna step out of the timeline just for a moment, because you talked about this question that a lot of entrepreneurs, and I suspect a lot of entrepreneurs here in the room today have, which is how do you raise money? And you've been one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the city. over $50 million raised for Julep. And it's interesting because I would suspect that pitching, to use that word broadly, a company that is now a cosmetics e-commerce company to a bunch of tech investors, both here locally and in the Valley and around the country for that matter, is a very interesting and unique experience. I'm sure you've got a great set of stories around that. What has that experience been like as time has gone on for you?
You know, it's funny when you are sort of committed to an idea, they're just, I don't know where the tenacity comes from. I don't think you can like just summon it. I don't think I would have even described it at that moment. It just is the thing to do. Hey, it is hard, right? It turned out that I got a lot of meetings because of my background, like BCG, Starbucks, Ivy League schools. I had never been in an environment where the odds of succeeding are so low. So the odds of like getting VC financing, and you can talk to this too, are like winning a lottery, right? So can you complain that you didn't win a lottery? Like there's no sort of, so I'm going to be candid and say, like, to me, I feel like a lot of the whole funding industry is like democracy. It totally sucks, but there's nothing better, and we should be super, super grateful for it and be willing to die for it, right? Where else would I ever be able to raise the money to be able to pursue this amazing business of my dreams? Like, I am so lucky I won the lottery, right? I kept an Excel spreadsheet of sort of yeses to nos, especially in the early days with angels, because like angels, it's like, oh my gosh, like it's like my eye doctor, my poor eye doctor at the top of Queen Anne Hill is like, do you want to invest? It's like, as he's examining my eyes, right? So you do everything at the beginning, and there's, because you have a goal, and you are trying to, bring as many people as you can to share your goal, and to, just knowing, like I like to tell people that, because if you are getting no's, like it's part of, as far as I know, it's part of the process. Maybe it's not for everybody, but for us it was like, hey, nail polish, like that's scary, or like, when we first started pitching, I think we were told by one very prominent VC firm in Silicon Valley that they funded only e-commerce pure plays, and so if I ditched the parlors, that they would fund, it's like, this is a fundable idea, you're a fundable person, but we don't like the parlors. And I was like, I don't understand that. They're profitable, they're great, they're part of our brand. And they were like, well, we just don't find anything with bricks and mortar or whatever. 3 years later, now like omni-channel, and it's like the new cool thing, right? Like that they, like Silicon Valley invented it. I think you just have to like sort of know who you are. I think that's the most important thing. Like at that point, we had to make a decision, and we did talk about it. It's like, do we do that? Do I ditch all of my current investors, who, by the way, never wanted to like invest in a nail parlor? They're investing in me. So what's the right thing to do there? What about my current employees? What about our current customers? And what about the fact that this is truly the heartbeat, even though these guys have a check? Like, what am I going to do? And we decided to, that we had to be who we were, even though that was a harder thing at that time. So I don't think that I have any secrets. Like, I actually don't think, this is what I do all the time. So one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten is from my hero, Howard Behar, who was the president at Starbucks, and sort of the other Howard, sometimes people called him. His advice is that you have to always wear one hat. You just have to be who you are. So if you're hanging out with me at my house having drinks, like, this is who I am. If you're sitting on the couch with me, watching Blackfish, which is my new favorite show, this is who I am. Like, if I'm at work, this is sort of I talk too much and overly candid. Like, this is who I am. So, you know, I kind of go into meetings like that. Like, we went into, I don't know if you remember this, but we went into our pitches and I had like baby pictures of me and my co-founder Kate, kind of like how we had met, and you know, because like for sort of VC firms who say like, look, it's about the people. You know, it's like, this is our story and why it's important, and you know, like why you should care, right? Like we want to do something to be different, and it was a risk. Like I wonder if there were any other pitches in Silicon Valley that started with like founders' baby pictures. But it was to tell the story of sort of, it was to tell the story of our tenacity. It was how I started out tonight talking about my family, like that this is not, we are not people who are going to take a challenge and shy away. We're going to lean in to the challenge and figure it out and be super tenacious about it. So, you know, in every instance, I think finding your voice and being who you are is really important, and it's something that I didn't know when I first started working. That's maybe why I was like a baby and so sort of sad as a lawyer, but part of it was the job and part of it was me, that I wasn't ready to be at work in that environment. I went to Ann Taylor, I bought my suit, and I went to work, and I didn't crack any jokes, and I tried to be like super serious and like, you know, not smile that much, and I just didn't know how to talk. I was like, I can't talk, and so, you know, then you're super boring, right? and then you're super bored, and but you have to find your own voice wherever you are, and I think like that's what we ended up doing, is we just went in and we like really sort of pitched with our, you know, as much with our hearts as with our heads. And I think that's, for me, what e-commerce is about. You have to really get to the hearts of your consumers, but it's also super analytic. You have to know your numbers, you have to know your LTVs, you have to have your, you know, like really think hard about your spreadsheets, and it's a math exercise, but it's also a heart and falling in love exercise. So you have to do both of those things, and I think that's what we brought to pitching, is we just sort of figured out how to say who we were and tried to magnify that as much as you can in 10 minutes.
Well, I think what you described, this idea of wearing one hat, it does require a lot of bravery, a lot of courage, the ability to really be comfortable in your own skin. And I think, I don't know, when I talk to girlfriends of mine who have meaningful positions, you know, in the business world, et cetera, it is something that a lot of women think very actively about. And you are fortunate in that, going back to the human side, you've got this amazing co-founder in Kate McDonald. And you both have tackled this journey together. Could you talk a little about the origin of that co-founding relationship and how you chose her as your co-founder?
You know, honestly, it sort of happened a little bit by accident. So it's funny, she had the idea, like sort of an idea for a clean, green, like social nail parlor experience with wine. So we both shared that, actually. I don't know if she's going to be mad at me for sharing that. She probably won't watch this either. She has twins. And she works at Julep, so she's working super hard. But you know, we talk about how she'd go to like nail salons with her Nalgene bottle full of wine with her friends. And so, you know, we were both talking about this sort of, why isn't there a third place, a social place for women to connect, and why are beauty products so non-innovative? And we were connected by somebody who said, hey, you guys both have been talking about the same thing. And she actually swears, we met at Starbucks, that I convinced her that this was never going to work. That I had run all these spreadsheets, and I was like, this is never going to work. And so this is where sort of I had stress tested, and I, you know, even in the year before I launched, as I was writing the business plan, I was trying to convince myself, and I was sort of playing with these things, and just like, I have this idea, and I was like, oh, Kate, this is never going to work. And so she said, like, wow, I met this really analytic woman, and she's really thought about it and gone to millions of different cities and done customer research, and she says it's never going to work, so I guess it can't work. And then so I started the first parlor.
was just wondering, so you had mentioned when you were out talking to different VC firms that you had some people tell you that they weren't going to fund something that was brick and mortar. And I was curious to know from the internal conception that the conception of Julep, was it initially conceived as just being a series of brick and mortar parlors, or was there always an e-commerce component to it, or was that something that developed organically after talking to VC firms who were saying, oh, well, we're only really interested in, something that might have an e-commerce component?
Was that it started off in the parlors, that it was something that people can conceptualize. I think people do need something physical that they could wrap their brains around in terms of a brand experience. And so, the original plan was primarily around bricks and mortar for like the first few years, but I have the sort of example of Starbucks in my mind. When the way we got into our sort of online presence actually is that as we tried to drive traffic in the parlors, we realized that what people wanted all the time was different colors and different products, and that they wanted to take home the products that we were developing and using in our parlors. And so as we started doing that, because we were trying to drive, more visits, we started developing these products and we wanted to share them elsewhere. The subplot behind that was that when we first opened the first 2 parlors, I was like, wow, I am just God's gift to business. Like, I started this business and it's super busy and we're overcrowded all the time. We're turning away 30% of the calls, tallying on a spreadsheet all of the money that we were turning down, and this is awesome. And then, I'm going to get the dates wrong, but it was in 2009 when WAMU disappeared, right? Our downtown parlor is right under where WAMU used to be. And 50% of our customers went away. And so, hey, I went from I'm God's gift to business to holy crap, how am I going to make payroll next month? And you see that in the, you read it, oh, how am I going to make payroll? When you know the faces and you know that those people need payroll to make rent, and you have convinced them to come join you, and you have the weight of that responsibility, it's a totally different story. And so actually Kate and I looked at that, and we looked at both we looked at it analytically, and we looked at it from a marketing perspective. So we talked to everybody we could in our network within a 1-week period who had ever done loyalty programs, or sort of we knew when we looked at the data, which we had because even at that stage we had an off-the-shelf online scheduling program that we used as our POS, our point of sale at the checkout. And so we had data by every customer that we just downloaded to Excel, we looked at it, and we realized that people were spending as much when they came in to make it feel better for her. And so we started a subscription program in our parlors so that, she could, it's a money-saving thing, you can treat yourself, you don't have to feel guilty, you come in, you don't even have to bring out your checkbook, you just, it's part of, it's like the payment method timing and the enjoyment timing are separated. And so in the height of the worst recession we've experienced in our lives, we started growing like crazy. And so it's oh, there's something here. And at the time I got invited to speak at this business breakfast in Bellevue. And basically there were 4 of us on the panel and 2 people in the audience, no joke. And I'm holy, I'm so busy, I'm not sleeping, this is all hard, and now I'm here and there's 2 people in the audience. And luckily, the other person on the panel was Daryl Cavens, who was starting a small company called Zulily at the time. And it was oh, Jane, you should come join me. And I was I'm building a brand. I don't know what you're doing over there. And so I kept in touch with them, and as we were, so that was the best thing that came out of that breakfast. And as I was sort of thinking about taking the work that we were doing for the parlors and developing these new products, which I was trying to do it quarterly at first because it's such a pain in the neck, or it's really hard executionally to launch new products all the time. But the women in the parlors weren't having it, right? They wanted monthly different things to keep coming back. And so we wanted to take that concept and bring it to, online. And I went to see Daryl about that, and he was like, Jane, have you heard of a thing called like Shoe Dazzle and Birchbox? And I was like, I've been a little bit busy, so no, I have not. And so I looked at those things, and I realized that Shoe Dazzle was run by a Korean-American ex-lawyer. So I cold called up Brian Lee at Shoe Dazzle, and I said, hey, you're a Korean-American ex-lawyer, me too. Happen to be in LA tomorrow, total lie. Can I meet with you? And he was like, sure. And so I flew down and spent the day with him. And after sort of chatting about this, he was like, hey, this is kind of cool. Do you want to sell me your company? And my gosh, can I say this? Hey, Brian. Hopefully this isn't going anywhere. I don't know if he was serious or not, but it was really great, again, to have somebody who is serious, like take you seriously, engage in your idea. And so I walked out of there thinking, like, he's for real. He's built this really big company, and it thinks that there's something in the idea that we have around combining innovation and community and doing it in a way that is a subscription that is something that people can look forward to every month, which is what happens in the credit. Because the main thing, it's great to get the thing, but it's almost a mental benefit of being able to look forward to something every month. It's like Christmas every month, which is why when we screw up shipping and it comes later, it's a big deal. They can't be like, hey, you know what? Christmas is like next month this time, right? Like you can't do that. Anyway, it was around it was really the customer experience that led us into the online part. And initially, honestly, the first time that we went and sort of chatted with a bunch of VC firms, everybody was sort of like, we don't understand, you have this parlor, you want to go online, you're not an engineer, you don't have an engineering team, we don't understand what you're doing. And so I used a $25 a month Adobe Business Catalyst program to launch Julep.com. The first page was, I ran out of money before we could actually get the engineer to finish the work. So it was a JPEG that the designer had created that was clickable to the purchase page. So it had about us, look the Julep story. But wherever you clicked, it just went to the purchase page. It wasn't really a page, it was just a JPEG. And I uploaded it, right? And so anyway, we got some customers that way. It was crazy, right? And customers, and that's how every decision has come about.
By the way, Julep Made really is like Christmas every month, so if you haven't checked it out yet, be sure to get a subscription. Holiday catalog is amazing. I think we are running out of time.
Yes.
Jane, thank you so much. Really.